British soldiers are still paying for sex in Kenya 3 years after the ban. I'm going to read into this more from openDemocracy, you guys. So it said inquiries raises questions about the MOD's failure to stop soldiers exploiting women after it told us it issued no sanctions. Why is this still happening? What are we doing to protect women from this? There's definitely a lot of questions that need to be raised here. The Ministry of Defence has an obligation to make sure that its soldiers don't go out of line, that they aren't doing that they're not supposed to be doing. There's supposed to be things, there are lines that shouldn't be crossed here. And apparently there was a ban in place and they're still doing this. Yeah, this is not good. This is really, really not good. And we know that there's been lots of problems with the British Army intel. We know internally there is still a problem of sexism within the British Armed Forces still. We know that obviously one of the things that, especially over the last several years, that conditions have not been great for British Armed Forces back home. And we also know that there's been and I think not just them, but also there's been less people have been inclined to join the British Armed Forces as well. So you also have a reduction in soldiers as well. So you have all these things happening, and now you're hearing stories like, when you see stories like this, once again, it just puts people more off wanting to join the British Armed Forces, and I wouldn't blame them, to be fair. So let's read a little bit more into this before I share my thoughts. So, British Army soldiers stationed in Kenya are still paying vulnerable women for sex, an internal service inquiry has confirmed, despite the military branding transactional sex in July 2022. The report identifies 35 allegations of troops stationed at the British Army Training Unit Kenya, that's the BATKU, paying local women for sex between July 2022 and March 2025. 9 of these alleged incidents took place after the ban came into effect in November 2022. So why is this still happening? The military redacted the number of provisions incidents from its report, suggesting that at least one soldier had been sanctioned for violating the ban. Soldiers who violate the arms policy ban faces an automatic discharge. The findings raise questions about the Ministry of Defence's failure to hold soldiers to account for paying for sex. It's about the lack of transparency about the situation. And in October, the MOD released data to openDemocracy that said no soldiers have faced sanctions since the ban was introduced. So is it a case of perhaps the ban's been they've said there's a ban, but there's not a ban, or that they're still doing it because they're still doing it and there's been no repercussions from it? The MOD has also repeatedly refused to answer our Freedom of Information request about the number of men investigated for paying for sex. The inquiry now proves this practice continues with impunity, as Kenyan campaigners and the families of Enes Wadwan, a 21-year-old sex worker who was allegedly killed by a British soldier in 2012, told us last year. Reacting to the inquiry's findings, Wadwan's niece, Eska, said that no action is ever taken against the BATUK soldiers who commit sexual abuse and harassment, she added. The report has recommendations, but we are not sure they will be followed. Some 238 soldiers told the inquiry that they knew of colleagues taking part in any sexual activity with the local nationals in Kenya in exchange for money, favours of goods since the ban. So they're obviously, essentially, they're being paid money, they're being offered treats and whatnot to basically do it, to have sex with them, and they'll get things in return. Bear in mind, there is poverty in parts of Kenya as well. 27 soldiers said that they had sex with local women, but that no transaction took place. Reports authors highlight that it was unlikely to be accurate, knowing that at least 3 of the 27 said they had visited local brothels. The authors warned that the military's failure to properly investigate and prove allegations means soldiers may take away the wrong messages. In particular, that nothing is likely to happen to them if they breach the policy. They recommended that allegations of transactional sex be passed on to the service police, saying the practice is harmful to vulnerable women, in part due to the power imbalance between Kenyan women and British soldiers. The report also recommends that soldiers receive more training about the ban during their annual behaviour training requirements before being deployed overseas. Currently, this includes only a passing reference to transactional sex. Yeah, they should be told this if you're going to go abroad, if you're going to be stationed abroad. This is unlikely to have a training effect we would wish to see, the inquiry said. Although it praised the leadership, reminders about the ban that once soldiers arrived in BATUK. The MOD introduced a ban on transactional sex the year after the Sunday Times published allegations that a British soldier stationed in Kenya had murdered Wanderu and dumped her body in a septic tank. Nodrick described her aunt to openDemocracy as very cheerful, and she was a joker. She was funny, hard-working, she added. She was such a social person, and even now, if she was still alive, she is who we're run for help. She warned that nothing seems to have changed since the ban. The only thing that can change is punishing those who are culpable, starting with the murder of my aunt. And because they're British soldiers, they seem to be getting away with it. While Defence Secretary John Henley met Wadu's family in April this year, little progress has been made on bringing her suspected killer to justice or getting compensation for the family. Henley criticised the government for sitting on their hands, and now he is sitting on his hands, Novick said. We feel that he used our family for political gain. She believes the UK government could do so much more and is now fundraising to travel to the UK later this year. I want to show people that something is wrong and nothing is happening. In Angus' case, that things are still the same, she said. We are asking for compensation, but they say they can do nothing until the Kenyan criminal investigation is done, Nokor added. The case was reopened in 2021, but no progress was made on that, she said. For 13 years we've been waiting, and still you want us to keep waiting. Kevin Cabal, a human rights lawyer in Nairobi, described the inquiry as very welcome, but says transactional sex is just one way British soldiers sexually abused Kenyan women. He represents a mother who says her children have been abandoned by fathers who returned to the UK from BATUK, often to their own families. Local women are therefore left vulnerable to forced to raise kids on their own after their fathers are discharged from duty in Kenya, Cubby told openDemocracy. In the past 2 years, we have documented 30 of these mostly consensual relationships, but this is the tip of the iceberg. The most overarching challenge is men who sire children and avoid responsibility by taking advantage of absence of policy and mechanism to hold them to account. The General Sir Roy Walker, Chief of the General Staff, who confirmed the MOD would be implementing the report's recommendation in full, included with new measures to prevent sexual exploitation and abuse. These include increasing the Army's ability to discharge people for engaging in transactional sex, and new and specific training programs placing an obligation on everyone in the Army to prevent sexual exploitation and abuse, and be increasing our oversight and assurance measures to ensure this is being taken as seriously as it warrants. He also acknowledges how the report sets out a number of areas where we've already taken action, which will help tackle sexual exploitation and make Kenyan women safer. There is absolutely no place for sexual exploitation and abuse by women in the British Army, Walker said. It is at complete odds with what it means to be a British soldier. It preys on the vulnerable and benefits those who seek to profit from the abuse and exploitation. The findings of the service inquiry I commissioned conclude that transactional sex is still happening in Kenya and at a low to moderate level. It should not be happening at all. We are fully committed to preventing sexual exploitation in any form and will continue to listen, step up and take action when we need to, including working with other services to learn lessons and share best practices across defence. If it is still happening, here is the thing. They're saying this is still happening, even though they're told not to do it, right? If this is still happening, it's not just the soldiers who need to be held accountable. It's those in command of it needs to be held accountable, because quite clearly they've been told to stop doing it and they're still doing it. So it's not just the soldiers that need to be punished here, it's their commanders who must be aware of this as well, because if the commanders are aware of this and they're allowing this to happen, there needs to be accountability on them to say, if you're not doing your job, then there needs to be accountability held to their higher ranks, because quite clearly if they're doing it, even though they've been told they're not to, and laws have been put in place saying that they're not allowed to do so, and they're still doing it, that's a failure of those who are in charge. It's not just the soldiers; it's a failure of those who are in charge as well. There needs to be accountability here. It's got to stop. Like, yes, you can argue, okay, it's not as bad as other places. It's not the point. It shouldn't be happening at all. It shouldn't be happening at all. And the thing is that when you allow something like that to fester, which is what it is, it entices more soldiers who come, and it entices more soldiers, especially new soldiers who come in or some come out. You know, there's rotations in that. It entices the new soldiers to do the same thing. It creates this culture, and it creates a culture for them, thinking that it's perfectly acceptable and normal for them to do what they do. The reality is we know it's wrong, and the reality is they know it's wrong, but they still think it's doing it because they think it's okay, because some of them probably haven't faced accountability. And that's where something needs to be done. Action needs to be taken. And if the soldiers aren't facing any action, it's because their commanders are not facing any action. It's wrong and it needs to stop. Not yesterday, now. It's just, I hate hearing stories like this. It makes me sick to my stomach. What do you guys think? What do you guys make of the situation here? British soldiers are still paying for sex in Kenya, despite the fact that they've been banned to do so. Let me know your thoughts on more on all this down in the comment section below. If you found this video interesting or informative, please hit that like button. We greatly appreciate it. Share it across social media so others are notified of this video. Subscribe if you haven't to already. Check out Rumble and Patreon for exclusive content on those platforms. If you want to financially support me in the work that I do on this channel, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.